Number 10. ATM Double Trouble. In late 2020, two 18-year-old women in Edinburgh, Texas, named Ashanti Slater and Isis Wallace, found themselves either really wanting or desperately needing some money, and they decided to get it by robbing people at ATM machines. The young woman made off with $600 during their first robbery when one of them approached a woman who was using an ATM at a Chase Bank around 9:30 at night. One of the perpetrators approached the victim wearing a black ski mask and carrying what looked like a gun. Fearing for the safety of her family members, who were at the bank with her, the victim handed over the money she'd just withdrawn. The bandits struck again a couple of days later, but their second set of victims were less cooperative. According to police, Wallace allegedly assaulted a woman through the window of her vehicle and stole her debit card after she withdrew $60 at a drive-up ATM. The victim's husband exited the vehicle to defend his wife, causing Wallace to run. He chased after her until she got into a waiting getaway car and sped off. The suspects were pulled over and arrested shortly after. They faced a slew of charges, including aggravated robbery, and grand theft auto. Number 9. Gas bombing gag. In 2013, a British gang found themselves facing serious charges after they blasted 31 ATMs open and made off with roughly £800,000 in cash. They used a technique that, until then, had only been seen in mainland Europe. It involved jimmying the machines and then lighting an explosive mixture to blast them fully open. In addition to all the cash they stole, the gang caused hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of damage. 7 of the gang members were caught at their designated hideout just hours after their latest mission. They received sentences totaling 114 years. But one of the suspects managed to evade law enforcement, and as of 2015, he was still at large. The fugitive, Adam Murphy, managed to avoid capture for 7 years. But law enforcement finally caught up with him in 2019. He finally faced justice last year and received a 17-year prison sentence. Number 8. ATM frustration leads to road rage. When 19-year-old Jonathan Chacon couldn't get his car to work one evening in 2005 at an ATM in Los Angeles, he turned his frustrations to the customer in line behind him, Claudia Torres, and began yelling at her. She turned to leave and got into her family's SUV, but Chacon wasn't done harassing her. He got into his car and began chasing the vehicle, which was being driven by Claudia's husband, 24-year-old Javier Adam. Their 2-year-old daughter was in the back seat. Chacon rammed his car into the SUV and caused it to crash into a light pole, which then fell on top of it. Firefighters worked for 45 minutes, using the jaws of life to get the victims out of the vehicle. Adam was rushed to the hospital, where doctors worked diligently to try to save his life, but they were unfortunately unable to, and the victim died from internal and head injuries. Claudia and the couple's little girl were injured, but survived. The suspect, who had recently been arrested several times on drug-related charges and was cited 10 times for traffic violations in the 3 years leading up to the deadly ordeal, fled the scene on foot. But police were quick to apprehend him. Chacon pleaded guilty to vehicular manslaughter and apologized for his foolish and fatal actions in court before receiving a 21-year prison sentence. Number 7. Internet Age ATM Heist. In 2013, a group of highly sophisticated hackers and thieves in more than 24 countries worked together to collectively steal $45 million in a matter of hours. The closely coordinated operation involved manipulating financial information online and then dispatching street-level criminals to withdraw cash from thousands of ATMs. Over $2.4 million was stolen from around 3,000 machines throughout New York City over a 10-hour period. This is also where the first crew of participants was caught. 8 men from the Big Apple were federally charged for their role in the high-tech scheme. They were captured with the help of surveillance footage, which revealed the sheer volume of ATMs that were hit throughout the crime spree. The incident was jarring for authorities. Speaking with New York Times journalist Mark Santora, Brooklyn-based U.S. Attorney Loretta Lynch pointed out how the widespread theft underscored the value of financial institutions and corporations throughout the world. In short, the most harmful damage was done by extremely intelligent criminals from the comfort of their homes and the anonymity that comes with working from behind a computer screen. And, of course, there were plenty of people who were eager to carry out the dirty work involved, as there was certainly something in it for them. The first step for the hackers was to raise the withdrawal limits on prepaid debit cards by breaking into the system used by the company that processes the transactions. They then tasked the street-level thieves with using the information to withdraw money, which translated copious amounts of money stolen from the company rather than individuals. By stealing from personal accounts, the criminals would have probably drawn the attention of authorities much sooner than they did. The hackers monitored the transactions that were physically being carried out to ensure that their hired help didn't take a bigger cut than they were supposed to. Details about the wanted spree have proven to be scarce, but it's unclear whether the masterminds of the operation were ever caught, although several low-ranking suspects have been charged over the years. Number 6. Confined contractor. A repairman from Corpus Christi, Texas, was changing the lock on a room that houses a collection of ATMs at a Bank of America in 2017 when he somehow locked himself inside. Normally, it would have been pretty easy for him to call for help, but he had left his phone in his truck, leaving him with no choice but to write notes and slip them through the machine's receipt slot. In one note, the man wrote, "Please help. I'm stuck in here and I don't have my phone. Please call my boss." He included his phone number with the plea. Some customers used the ATM, but did not seem to take the note seriously. Finally, someone was concerned enough to flag down an officer, according to police, who spoke with CNN. In fact, even the responding officers initially thought the note was a joke, until they heard what they described as a little voice coming from inside the machine. They broke the door down and freed the repairman, who had been trapped for 3 hours. Incidents like this are rare, but not unheard of, according to a Corpus Christi Police Department spokesperson, who said that they can't say it's never happened, but 95% of the time, the person stuck inside has their phone on them. The repairman said that when he entered the room housing the ATMs, the door shut behind him and locked automatically. He was pretty mortified by the whole ordeal and said that he simply wanted the situation to go away. Number 5. Rich from a glitch. An Australian bartender named Dan Saunders thought he had hit it big in 2011 when he discovered an ATM glitch that enabled him to spend $1.6 million that didn't belong to him over a 5-month period. After a night of partying with his friends, the then 29-year-old used an ATM to transfer money between his savings account and a credit card. To his surprise, the machine allowed him to transfer more money than he actually had, without penalty to his account. Saunders realized that he was able to do this during certain times when the ATM system went offline and disconnected from the bank, creating a delay between the withdrawal and the documentation of the transaction. Simply put, he was able to overdraw on his accounts to the tune of large sums of money without the system detecting it. It was a wild 5 months for the bartender, who was suddenly able to afford to throw wild parties and splurge on luxury hotel rooms, upscale dinners, and other lavish indulgences. He even got in touch with his philanthropic side by donating some of the stolen money to his friends for their college tuition. Ironically, it was when Saunders stopped making the financial transactions that his bank finally caught on. He recounted the ordeal in a Vice interview, explaining how it took 10 months after finding out for the bank to take legal action against him. To make things even weirder, the authorities and the judge had trouble wrapping their minds around exactly how the complex scheme worked. Consequently, he was let off pretty easily, considering the level of theft involved. Saunders served 1 year in prison and was under post-release supervision for just 18 months thereafter. After paying his debt to society, he returned to work in the hospitality industry. Number 4. The Skeleton Mask Robber. Over a 2-week period in early 2005, a robber wearing a skeleton mask and brandishing a handgun robbed numerous people at drive-up ATMs throughout Raleigh, North Carolina. His MO was to wait until a customer slid their card into the machine and entered their PIN number. He then rushed up to the victim, stuck the gun in their face, and demanded their money. When police came close to catching the culprit, he stopped committing the robberies. But law enforcement remained committed to bringing the thief to justice, and it was only a matter of time before they did. The perpetrator eventually struck again, only this time, he robbed an actual bank rather than a customer at an ATM machine. He also reportedly tried to rob a CVS store. An investigation of the bank robbery led police to 25-year-old Davis James Talton, who they also connected to the ATM crimes. He pleaded guilty to 7 counts of common law robbery and 1 count of attempted robbery, and was handed a 9 to 15-year prison sentence. Number 3. An abandoned ATM. Police in San Antonio didn't have to search for long before finding an ATM that was recently stolen from one of the city's Northside bank locations. They noticed that it was missing from a Chase Bank drive-thru after receiving a call about the incident around 4 o'clock in the morning. someone had ripped the ATM right out of the wall. Officers simply followed a trail of drag marks on the ground, and it led them straight to the missing machine. The thieves who stole it had left it in the parking lot of a dollar store. There was a large chain around it that was also connected to an abandoned pickup truck that was used to drag it to the site from the bank. Witnesses reportedly saw the group leaving the scene in a different vehicle, which they provided law enforcement with a description. The vehicle was tracked down outside a nearby apartment complex. At the last update, its owner was being held as a person of interest. Detectives are still investigating the bizarre heist and working to determine who else was involved. Number 2. Tractor driving thief. In one of the more bizarre crime stories to make headlines recently, a thief in Brentwood, California stole a tractor from a construction site and used it to remove an ATM from a Wells Fargo bank. Police were alerted to the incident during the early morning hours, courtesy of an alarm that the burglary set off, as well as witness reports. The suspect caused severe damage to the front of the building during the heist, but they failed to get any cash out of the ATM, which was found just 600 feet from the bank. Police found the tractor abandoned in a field. A law enforcement spokesperson said that it was extremely dangerous to steal such a large tractor. Thankfully, nobody seemed to have been hurt in the commission of the crime. The agency did not identify the suspect and urged anyone with information to come forward. The investigation is ongoing. And number 1, brute force. In 2014, a burglar took an unconventional approach to robbing an ATM in Fremont, California. He rammed his van through the front window of a gas station, then proceeded to unbolt the machine from the floor and loaded it into the vehicle before driving off. The alarming heist happened in the early hours of the morning when the clerk was alone in the store. This isn't the first time a thief crashed their vehicle in the process of stealing, or trying to steal an ATM. Late last year, a group of suspects slammed a stolen van into the entrance of a Baltimore CVS in an attempt to gain entry into the store. Things didn't go as planned, and they abandoned the operation, leaving the van at the scene. The vehicle was still running when officers arrived. A police spokesperson said that the ATM was damaged, but the thieves failed to extract any cash from it. A pair of robbers in Brooklyn had better luck when they rammed a car into an ATM during the early morning hours earlier this year. They made off with over $6,000 in cash after robbing the machine at a gas station in the Sheepshead Bay neighborhood. One of the bandits dropped his cell phone and unknowingly left it at the scene, and the pair had the guts to return and ask workers if they had seen it. The NYPD released a photo of one of the men, who was captured on surveillance footage, but it appears as though the suspects remain at large.
Nine. Are you impressed? In June 2014, on a cruise ship headed to Brazil, 28-year-old Jorge Alberto Lopez Amores was celebrating his favorite soccer team's triumph at the final of the World Cup. The cruise ship was all about the World Cup and played clips of the victory on screens all throughout the ship. We aren't sure if Amores just couldn't contain his joy and felt he could do what he did without consequences or what. You see, Amores met a woman on the ship and he was really into her. So he came up with an idea to impress her. He dove off the ship, plunging into the ocean. All the passengers were stunned. They contacted the crew, who halted the vessel and did a complete turn to search for him. When the ship finally reached the spot where he supposedly dived, the young man was nowhere in sight. Amores was the son of a rich lawyer and was one among the 3,000 passengers on board. He allegedly shouted out, "Look at me," just before leaping across the railing. Here's what a fellow passenger said. "I saw him chatting up a pretty female journalist aboard the ship. He was animated, a result of too much booze, and the team doing so well so far in the tournament. I heard him say to her, 'I am so happy that I can fly.' And with that, he stuck his arms out and dived overboard. The ship was moving at a fair clip, and he vanished into the foam created in the ship's wake. Brazil's coastline waters are loaded with deadly water currents and sharks. Government authorities in specific coastal locations raise the number of lifeguards and post warning signs to visitors about sharks. Amore's body was never found, and it's safe to say the girl was not impressed. 8. 24th floor. On July 9, 1993, Toronto lawyer Gary Hoy was executing his usual party trick during a tour of the Toronto Dominion complex to his new co-workers. He flung himself against his office's windows to display the strength and power of the glass panes. Only this time it backfired. The stunt, which was supposed to dazzle onlookers, ultimately resulted in his death. He had allegedly pulled this act on numerous occasions, having rebounded harmlessly off the glass. After one effort, which saw the glass hold up, Hoy attempted one more, and this went on and on. He thought it was funny. Well, the glass remained intact, but we can't say the same about the metal framework that it was lodged into. The power of Hoy slamming against the window over and over again was enough to dislodge the window completely from its framework, allowing the whole intact window and Hoy to fall from the 24th floor of the building. A structural expert, Bob Greer, stated, "I don't know of any building code in the world that would allow a 160-pound man to run up against a glass and withstand it." In another interview, the firm's representative indicated that the glass in reality did not shatter, but came out of its frame, resulting in Hoy's deadly plunge. Well, Hoy did prove his point, that the window glass was really strong. The framework was not, though. 7. Bagel Boy. In what we call a funny situation, mainly because no one was harmed, in August 2016, a guy sought to impress a lady by leaping over rooftops in Oakland. I don't know any girl that's impressed with this sort of thing. Do you? One moment he was like, "Hey, watch this," expecting his skills would make those watching fall in love or whatever. But unfortunately for him, he slipped and got wedged between two buildings. It's tricky to tell what the worst aspect of the entire event could have been for this man. Was it humiliating himself, being stranded between buildings, or getting the whole thing broadcast on Twitter? Besides, he wasn't just wedged between any two buildings. He found himself between a Qdoba and Bruegger's Bagels. The bagel joint even put up a sign taking a dig at the man. The sign read, "We will not be opening till 7 a.m. due to the man who thought it would be a good idea to jump our rooftop to impress his girlfriend and got stuck between the walls. Sorry for the inconvenience." Yikes. 6. Too Fast, Too Furious. A young driver who murdered a father of two by ramming into him with his car was sentenced last year in 2020. He was speeding around Northampton's Wellingborough Road in the UK. Callum Richardson accelerated and knocked 47-year-old Mr. Salem Lufti at a speed of 48 miles per hour, 77 kilometers per hour, right in the middle of the crowded city center route. But how did he lose control of the vehicle all of a sudden? He was attempting to impress a driver behind him. The 19-year-old driver crashed into the Northampton dad, who was simply trying to cross the road. Pedestrians have the right of way. In fact, during his sentence at Northampton Crown Court, the court declared that Richardson was probably gazing at his rearview mirror when he floored his Ford Fiesta, presumably to look cool to a BMW driver who was following right behind him. A witness testimonial from that night, August 17, 2019, was read out. She said, "I watched as the car flashed past at a remarkable speed. I didn't see the collision. I heard a loud bang from just down the road and turned my head to see an object flying in the air. It was so loud I thought it had hit a car. Then I heard screams from other passerby. I ran to him and asked someone to call 999. I stroked his hair and waited for the ambulance to arrive." Richardson had reportedly raced from 30 miles per hour to 48 miles per hour in a short distance of just 18 meters and struck Lufti directly. Lufti was knocked unconscious after the crash and was transported to Northampton General, but sadly passed away later that night. In his original testimony to the police, he rejected the accusation. He stated Lufti suddenly stepped in front of his vehicle, but there was nothing he could have possibly done at the moment to avoid hitting it. However, last year the court found Richardson guilty for taking a life. His Honor Rupert Mayo determined that he could not save the 20-year-old from going to jail. Richardson was imprisoned for 3 years and barred from ever driving again. Not that cool. Do you think 3 years is a long enough sentence for a crime like this? Let us know in the comments below, and if you're liking this video, be sure to hit the thumbs up and subscribe buttons if you haven't already. 5. First date. This is another case about a guy that thought he was just so cool. A Florida guy was recently arrested after running a red light and leading police on a high-speed chase. He was on his motorcycle with a girl he was going out with that night. Police had to temporarily break off the chase while Taylor Beverly darted through traffic, running even more red lights and traveling at well over 100 miles per hour, 161 kilometers per hour. Clearwater Police Department officials finally caught up and arrested 22-year-old biker Taylor William Beverly. When they caught up to him, he expressed that he was trying to impress the girl. She was actually screaming at him to stop, but he didn't listen. It was their first and probably last date. Beverly was charged with a felony charge of attempting to flee from the cops at high speeds while displaying a wanton disregard for the safety of persons or property. His bond was set at $10,000. So not only did he have to pay a big fine, he also lost the girl. Doesn't pay to disobey. 4. Tough guys. 3 kids around 13 years of age in Naberezhny Chelny, Russia, were trying to look tough in front of the ladies. They were pacing back and forth down the street showing off their moves when they saw an innocent trash can on the sidewalk and decided to mess it up. A street CCTV camera caught footage of the whole thing. After looking back to ensure that the girls were still watching, one of the youngsters walked up to the trash can and kicked it as hard as he could. But what happened afterward is both humorous and troubling at the same time. The whirling bin flipped over and whacked the guy in the crotch. Ouch! The youngster can be seen leaning over, gripping himself tight, clearly suffering from the agony of his failed stunt. The females were totally unimpressed, to say the least. This was a tremendous fail. But wait, the story doesn't end there. One of the other boys decided to get revenge on the trash can. He too hit the trash can using the same kicking approach. But once again, the trash can spun around and whacked the kid in the leg, leaving him to hobble away while the girls giggled. Didn't he get the hint from the first time around? The trash can hit the boys back so hard that they had to seek medical attention. The boys confessed to medics that they intended to impress the females by hitting the trash can. And that didn't work out. Don't mess with the can or you'll get trashed. Wait, what? 3. Vic. A young man tried to show off his strength earlier this year in August while on a date with a super curvy woman. This girl was thick, both up top and junk in the trunk. We aren't sure if it was their first date or if this guy has a history of trying to pull off stunts like this or what. The couple were inside a cafe waiting for their food order. One of them propped their phone up to take a video. In the video, the man picks up the vivacious woman and holds her in his arms like a baby. Now remember, this woman is thick. Her breasts are practically hitting him in the face as he's holding her. He then decides to do some squats. He bends his knees and starts moving up and down. The girl is screaming. Is she excited or scared of being dropped? You can kind of see his knees start to buckle under both of their weight. He did this for a few seconds before he had to put her down. He nearly broke his waist. Later on, he had to go to the doctor. It turns out that he threw out his back. But hey, at least they have some weird clip to look at later. 2. Like my stunts? It's safe to say that social media has driven a few people crazy. In 2017, an Indian motorcyclist performed stunts to show off to a girl on Facebook. 25-year-old Naveen C. had his buddies follow right next to him and videotape him in a car while he did dangerous stunts. He was trying to make the most epic video possible. Naveen chose to release the video on Facebook for everyone to ooh and ah at. But his impressive idea didn't go over well with the authorities in the area. You see, Naveen didn't have a driver's license, and the stunts he was performing were way too bold to be doing in the congested area he was doing them in. Before he even had the chance to upload his video to Facebook, the police pulled him and his friends over. They had seen what he was doing on the traffic cameras and looked up the registration numbers. Cops arrived at the scene quickly before anyone got hurt. Naveen was arrested for his reckless driving, and police seized all of his equipment. They took his bike, the camera, even his friend's car. Is this an overreaction by the police? Well, performing death-defying stunts on motorbikes on public roads has been a rather common sight of late. The craze to upload and receive as many likes as you can on social media platforms are driving people to the edge. Literally. In a similar case, an 18-year-old pillion rider, Shiny Kiran, died after trying to pop a wheelie on his street bike and was run over by a minivan. The cops have since tried to impose strict rules and high fines to deter bike enthusiasts from risking their lives and those of others as well. 1. Race to the top. This incident vividly demonstrates how attempting to impress someone could go disastrously wrong. An accountant at a Bulgarian business almost died of a heart attack. What caused his heart attack, though? Trying to impress his boss with punctuality. The incident happened when 48-year-old Gabriel Alaian noticed his boss approaching the elevator. Alaian ran up 7 floors as fast as he could and managed to sit at his desk moments before his employer entered the room. And because he raced up in such a hurry, he immediately collapsed when he got to his desk. Doctors say his heart failed. The publication stated Alaian was recovering at home after being released from the hospital. When his boss learned what happened, he reduced Alaian's workload. I guess he felt bad. 8. Lizette Calviero. After moving to New York City for an unpaid internship in 2013, Lizette Calviero went out of her way to maintain a certain image. She spent the next 3 years racking up credit card debt to pay for clothes, vacations, dining out, and all the other trappings of a lifestyle she couldn't afford. The young woman acted like everything was fine on social media, where she showed off her reckless purchases. Even after Lizette moved back to her hometown of Miami and started working full-time, her wanton spending continued. Not everything she bought was expensive, but she learned the hard way that even small purchases and bargain deals add up. To make matters worse, she was only making the minimum payments on the multiple credit cards she used to live wildly outside her means. By the time Lizette turned her situation around, she was $10,000 in the hole. It wasn't until she sat down and added up all her debts that she realized how out of control her spending had become. She wanted to return to New York City, which she knew would be impossible if she didn't change her habits. To make it happen, Lizette began making much higher payments on her credit cards and living much more frugally. She rented a room in the Big Apple for the unusually low price of $700 per month, while she chipped away at her bills and spent conservatively on both necessities and indulgences. Her newfound financial skills enabled her to pay off all her credit card debt in just 14 months. Lizette began using her position as an influencer to share her experience with going into debt to keep up with the pressures of social media. She now dedicates her platform to educate others on how to be responsible with money and to avoid making the same mistakes that led to her financial mess. 7. Jeffrey Hutton. Like many people who owe money to creditors, 38-year-old Jeffrey Hutton misdirected his frustrations at the debt collector who showed up at his home in Essex, England to collect payment in 2018. Tina Contello was just doing her job when she went to pick up a weekly installment that Hutton had agreed to pay as part of an arrangement to pay off his debts. When the 49-year-old mother of 3 failed to return home from work that day, her family reported her missing. One of Hutton's neighbors recognized Tina's vehicle after police released an appeal to the public for information, leading investigators to the man's house. Inside, they found the woman's brutally murdered body. Someone had stabbed her over 30 times in a clear fit of rage. Naturally, detectives turned their attention toward Hutton, who had emerged from his home covered in blood. He claimed that an unknown attacker had come inside and killed Tina, but the police didn't buy the story. Investigators accused Hutton of buying cocaine and looking at porn online just minutes after he murdered Tina and stole money out of her purse. They found his DNA on her body and the murder weapon. Hutton received a life sentence with a minimum of 30 years. While in prison, he received treatment, and they prescribed medication for mental illness. But he couldn't escape his demons and committed suicide in his prison cell just months into his sentence. 6. Eric Mosley and Sandra Cruz Lopez. 31-year-old Eric Mosley and his 39-year-old ex-girlfriend, Sandra Cruz Lopez, were both shot to death in Las Vegas on Mother's Day last year. They found Eric in his trailer, and they discovered Sandra's body several miles away inside of a burning truck. They made no arrest until several months later when police charged 24-year-old Antonio Barry Edwards and 30-year-old Jordan Monahan with kidnapping, murder, and arson. They accused the pair of forcibly taking Sandra from the trailer she shared with Mosley, making her drive to the outskirts of the city, and then firing 7 bullets into her. They shot Eric dead inside the trailer in a parking lot. Witnesses told police that the suspects may have murdered the couple over an unpaid debt that Eric owed to Barry Edwards for a stolen truck. He allegedly owed somewhere between $100 and $800 for the vehicle and hadn't ponied up. Sandra reportedly had no association with the suspects. Her murder was simply an act of retribution for her ex-boyfriend's failure to make good on his debt. 5. Anthony Knotts. Ed and Pat Cobbler of Greensboro, North Carolina, thought nothing of loaning their credit card to their pastor, Reverend Anthony Knotts, in 2011. After all, pastors are trustworthy people, and the Cobblers considered Knotts to be one of their best friends. But it wasn't long before the charges racked up, eventually amounting to $50,000. The Cobblers have spent the last 10 years trying to get Knotts to make good on his debt, which is now over $100,000 with interest and late fees. Besides the credit card charges, Knotts also owes the couple $10,000 for a business investment he failed to pay back. The Cobblers took the matter to court, and Knotts was a no-show 3 times. He finally showed up after they jailed him in an unrelated case of writing more than $18,000 worth of bad checks to a food vendor for expenses relating to a restaurant that he owns. By then, the case with the Cobblers had fallen into a default judgment, ordering Knotts to repay the full amount that the couple claims he owes. The disgraced pastor recently owned up to his mistakes and apologized for all the problems he caused to Ed and Pat, who let money come between them and devastate their friendship. He admitted he skipped court because it had embarrassed him and didn't know how to deal with the situation. But he acknowledged that trying to sweep it under the rug only made things worse. Ed told the local station WFMY that he forgives Knotts, but is unwilling to forget the debt and expects the Reverend to pay it back. 4. Jamie Patrick Mansfield. When the New Zealand government imposed a COVID-19 vaccine mandate for certain sections of the country's workforce earlier this year, a wave of protest erupted on Parliament grounds. The demonstrations continued for several weeks as violent clashes broke out between protesters and police. Meanwhile, angry anti-vaxxers set fires and vandalized their surroundings. Among those in attendance was 35-year-old influencer Jamie Patrick Mansfield, who goes by the name Jay Ratana on social media. His content, which revolves mostly around conspiracy theories, has attracted a sizable following of people who share his distrust of the government. Mansfield is a member of Convoy NZ 2022, the group that instigated the protest. Radio New Zealand recently revealed that the organization received thousands of dollars in donations over just a few days, and that the money went straight into Mansfield's bank account. The network uncovered disturbing details about his financial history that raises some serious concerns about what they have used the donations for. Mansfield has a lengthy track record of unpaid debts. He went bankrupt in 2011, only to apply for bankruptcy again the following year, and a third time in 2020. That same year, Mansfield's landlord took him to court over unpaid rent, and they awarded him nearly $2,800. Over $1,000 of it remains unpaid. When Radio New Zealand first reached out to Mansfield, he initially refused to discuss the matter. He later denied stealing any of the donations that came pouring in to help fund the group's agenda, and claimed that he even put up some of his own money toward the cause. But Mansfield got suspiciously defensive for someone who supposedly has nothing to hide. He accused a reporter of having their facts wrong and blocked them on social media. Determined to understand the matter, journalists continued to dig into the man's background. Acquaintances of Mansfield only added to the growing body of evidence that he has a majorly bad habit of being financially irresponsible and untrustworthy, making the already murky details surrounding the protest group's finances seem even shadier. 3. Citizens Energy Group versus Indianapolis landlord. They recently hit an Indianapolis landlord with a $1.3 million lawsuit from the city's utility company over an alleged seven-figure unpaid water bill. Citizens Energy Group took action against the nonprofit JPC Charities, which owns several low-income apartment complexes throughout Indianapolis, in late February. The landlord has a history of running late on the water bill, but things escalated to a whole new level when the utility company shut off the water to 900 apartments. It was the first time Citizens Energy Group resorted to the drastic measure, which spokesperson John Considine described as a last resort. Speaking with the Indianapolis Star, Considine acknowledged the move created an unfair hardship for tenants, whose rent includes utilities. The city agreed to pay half the bill to get the water turned back on, but has clarified that it expects JPC Charities to pay back the money. Local officials are familiar with the organization, with thousands of housing violations cited over the years. The nonprofit is notorious for allegedly housing its renters in deplorable slum-like apartments. Last year, the Indiana State Attorney General sued JPC Charities to force the organization to improve its properties, where residents deal with frequent fires, leaking and collapsed ceilings, broken windows, and other hazardous conditions. The lawsuit was unfortunately unsuccessful, but now that the organization's failure to keep up with its expenses is costing the city money, it's probably safe to assume that the government will hold JPC Charities accountable for its debts. 2. Nicholas Alaverdian. Nicholas Alaverdian is a self-proclaimed child advocate who used his own experiences within the foster care system to campaign for change. But he has a dark side, and these true colors came to light in 2020 when the FBI accused him of stealing the identity of his former foster mother, Sharon Lane. She had filed a complaint in Ohio against Alaverdian, alleging that he got 22 credit cards and loans in her husband's name and racking up as much as $200,000 of debt. By then, police also wanted him in Utah over sexual assault allegations dating back to 2008. Shortly after learning that he was under legal scrutiny, Alaverdian claimed doctors had diagnosed him with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. The following month, news outlets reported he had died, citing his family's anonymous testimony and an obituary. But the fugitive was alive and well. He faked his death and fled to Scotland, where he lived under the name Arthur Knight to avoid being apprehended for an international arrest warrant they issued against him. It's just one of several aliases that Alaian has used in his attempts to weasel out of accountability for his actions. His true identity went undetected until late last year when he ended up on a ventilator in the hospital with COVID-19. Detectives identified him as Alaian using photographic evidence. He claimed they had made a mistake and that he wasn't who they thought he was, even after people who knew him confirmed he was the wanted felon. Alaian is still in Scotland. He's free on bail while authorities work to get him extradited to the U.S. so he can finally face justice. 1. Malay Mall and Baron Chakraborty. Late last year, 27-year-old Malay Mall loaned 8,000 rupees to a businessman in West Bengal, India, named Jain Alam Mola, so that he could buy building materials. Months passed, and Alam failed to repay McCall. Finally, in early April, the indebted borrower contacted McCall and said that he could finally pay back the loan. McCall and his friend, Baron Chakraborty, went to Alam's factory to collect the promised payment. Upon their arrival, he shot them dead at point-blank range. He then decapitated the pair. Nearby residents noticed the men's bikes parked outside the factory and became suspicious about who they belonged to and why they were there. The concerned community members questioned Alam, who claimed that McCall and Barum were inside the factory drinking. But something about the story didn't add up, so the curious locals barged into the building where they found the two men dead on the floor in a pool of blood. The enraged civilians demanded Alam's arrest. In an act of protest against his freedom, they set fire to two of the businessmen's vehicles. Meanwhile, Alam fled, sparking a widespread manhunt. Police caught up to him in Kolkata and arrested him on suspicion of the double murder. If convicted, he faces the death sentence and they will hang him. A police spokesperson said that the suspect had a habit of taking sizable sums of money for promised construction materials and failing to deliver the products. It was customary for him to scam unsuspecting lenders and customers. Would you rather relinquish your hard-earned college degree for student loan forgiveness or spend the rest of your life in debt but working your dream job? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, please give us a like and subscribe if you haven't already. Thanks for watching. See you soon.